I might make this a little interesting. Okay, so the book that I actually read was entitled Inglorious. And the entire book basically answers the question, or asks the question, why live and why life? The title basically describes the main character in the book, Inglorious. She's a normal, everyday person living in England. Her name is Rosa. And at first I started out reading it, and I was like, this is kind of getting boring and depressing, and I'm really not liking this. But the more it went along, the more I realized how relevant this entire book really is. And we all go through those times that we ask those questions, the question why? Why am I going through this? Why me? Why is this part of my life? Is there really going to be a happy ending? Is there really going to be something better? And she goes through basically everything that you could possibly think of within a 1-year period, actually a 9-month period. She starts out and her mother dies, but it starts out with her in her office, and she finally decides that as a journalist in a newspaper, she is sick and tired of this every day, always doing the same thing, and she's running out of ideas. She's not being creative anymore, and so she decides to randomly quit. So she quits her job. Her mother has died a few months before, and then she goes home in a few weeks to her boyfriend, who they've been having a rough patch, and he finally ends up breaking up with her. And they've been together for 10 years, living together for 10 years. And so basically her life is this constant, jagged, up and down point where she's basically just struggling to survive. And she's living with other people, she has no job. And throughout the entire book, she's searching for a job. And at the same time, you see what she's thinking, and she's writing in her notebook the entire time. And it's actually, you see her in an out-of-body experience. Her entire life is really basically, she's watching what's going on around her, but feels like she has no part in what's going on. And so there are a few main points throughout the book that the first one would be why. She asks that question, why. She is writing down everything she's thinking, first of all. She doesn't really understand what's going on. She doesn't understand why he left her. She doesn't understand why her mom had to die. But she also doesn't want to admit to herself that she's weak. She doesn't want to admit that she could possibly have been in the wrong. She doesn't want to admit that, she shouldn't have quit her job. She's very prideful in that aspect. But she's constantly, really just asking those questions, and she's lost all her friends. She's, because of her own doing, but she doesn't realize that. So she's very, she's unable to admit to herself what she's done wrong. And then the next part basically is the revelation, the revealing of that she really is just one person in a very large world. That the world doesn't revolve around her, and she even states that herself. At one point, she's talking to her dad, and her dad's like, you know what, you just need to do what makes you happy. And she sits there and she realizes at that moment, I'm really not the center of the world. The world doesn't revolve around me, and I have to figure out what I'm doing. In her mind, she's constantly making lists, and the crazy thing is that that's what we do a lot of times. We'll make lists, but we'll never do anything about it. We just feel like because we've made that list, we're now going to do it, we're now going to get something done, but she just keeps adding stuff to the list that she needs to get done, and she never really does anything about it. She's in debt. She's trying to beg her husband or her ex-boyfriend to sell the furniture and give her the money because she has no money to try to pay off her debt. She has no job. She even states at one point she goes in for a job interview with a lady who wants a tutor for her children, and when she leaves, she calls that lady back a few days later, and the lady goes, well, my children didn't like you. I wanted to give you the job, but my children didn't like you. And rather than saying, oh, well, those brats, that's what she initially thought, but then she goes, those children are really smart. They saw right through me. They saw that I didn't really care. They saw that all I wanted was the money. And so, like we always say, children are sometimes the best judges of character. And she even goes off for a weekend with some of her friends who she hadn't talked to for a while, and she sees their family and this couple and how happy they are. Even though they've got all these children running around crazy, they're truly, genuinely happy with their life, and she really wants that. And so, as she's watching people go by and she has those out-of-body experiences, she starts to wonder, you know, what can I do differently? How can I get out of this rut that I'm in? And then finally, in the end, after, you know, everything just keeps going wrong, she finally just breaks down and she goes over to her ex-boyfriend's house and is like begging, the night before his wedding with her best friend, her ex-best friend, and she's begging him for this money for the furniture. She's just like, I have nothing left. And when she goes home, he sends her, she gets this check the next day with 500 pounds. And she decides at that moment that she's going to basically escape it all. And in the end, she asks herself the question, why not? And rather than, you know, continuing on this path where she has those lists and she has those things she needs to get done and she has to get out, she has to move out of that person's house because, you know, that person wants to start a new life because she's been living with her and that person has a guy she's getting married to, and so she's basically kicking her out. And so she's like, you know what, I have 500 pounds now, I'm just going to get on a train, the next train going anywhere. And the end of the book is basically her getting on that train and taking it to Paris. And you don't know what's going on once she gets there, but she finally writes everything down that she has been wanting to tell people this entire time, and is going to send it to him in a letter, saying, apologizing for all the trouble she's caused, apologizing for, you know, not ever apologizing, and for not realizing that the world doesn't revolve around her. And so, in the end, she realizes that it really was all her fault, and she finally admits it to herself. And so the basic question that the book asks, and it makes you really think about, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going? Why not start now? Don't keep writing lists whenever you're never going to get it finished. And it really, you do what makes you happy. And that's what the book really, really points to. So, yeah. That's basically it. Do you want me to actually do the Frankenstein?